Hello Astro Bros subscribers. So today we're going to be talking about Revati Nakshatra, which is the 27th Nakshatra. It ends off the Nakshatra series that we've been doing for a while now, talking about the lunar mansions in both Western and Vedic astrology. So I guess I'll have to give the obligatory explanation of like what a nakshatra is. A nakshatra is the time it takes for the moon to move in one day across the ecliptic. So one solar day of 24 hours, the moon moves roughly 13 and 1/3 degrees, and there's 27 of those because if you multiply 13 and 1/3 degrees by 27, you get 360 degrees, which is the total orbit of the moon. So, through the zodiac belt. So basically, each of these day-long lunar transit sort of periods has a astrological significance, because astrology is basically taking the astronomical events that recur over and over the course of our lives and relating them to psychological, sociological phenomenon. So, each of these nakshatras has a co-ruler in the same way that the sign of Scorpio and Aquarius and Pisces have co-rulers. Each one of these sort of lunar cross sections has its own co-ruler as well. And the 27th one is Revati. It goes from 16.4, which is 16 and 40 out of 60, so 16 and 2/3 degrees Pisces, to 0 degrees Aries or 30 degrees Pisces, which is basically the same thing anyway. So it's the last 13 and 1/3 degree section before the entire system starts over, and that would be considered a lunar month of 27 days. Which is different than the time it takes for the sun to cross over a sign, which is obviously 30 days, which is where we get our months from. So, this being said, the nakshatra of Revati is co-ruled by 3 planets, because it's the sign of Pisces. Pisces has 2 rulers that deal with the sign, and one of these is Jupiter, which is basically the archetype of the teacher and the benefic aspect of culture and society. So it's your cultural value systems, it's your belief system. And if Jupiter were the only planet to rule the sign, then it would be just like Sagittarius, which is basically your preacher figure who is standing up in front of the crowd and teaching the cultural wisdom, except for that the sign of Pisces, which is the other sign Jupiter rules, has another co-ruler, which alters the effect of the sign. And that co-ruler is Neptune. Now, Neptune is a planet that rules hypotheticals, basically. It rules delusions, confusion, any sort of like theory, like pre-scientific artistic visions, things that could potentially be known but have not yet come to pass. It's kind of like the absolute unknown, and it's also the force that decays structures and social rules. So it's 2 things basically. It's the absolute unknown, and it's the potential of things, in fact the inevitability of things, to decay over time. That's basically what Neptune is. It also covers things like, to some extent, like addictions, sexuality, sort of just taboo topics in general, because again, the part of the reason that they're taboo is that they are unknown. Neptune also rules areas like forests, mountaintops, jails, asylums, places that are like far away from everyday realities. They're sort of outside of the cultural belief system. They're like very natural sort of, or isolated places. So, with that being said, you've got the interplay here of Jupiter and Neptune. So you get a preacher who teaches from isolated places, who teaches from outside of the cultural boundaries and belief systems. This is where new belief systems and new theories of the world can be born, is the sign of Pisces. It's also where all the wrong ideas live too. So it's, hard to separate the wheat from the chaff. But that's why Virgo is the opposite of Pisces, because Virgo essentially is the critic. Pisces is the hypothesizer and Virgo is the critic. And through the interplay of these two people, you get our views of the world being created, criticized, and then in the middle you might get something that looks more like the world than if you just had one of those poles acting. So, that being said, the nakshatra of Revati is different than the nakshatra we covered last time, which is Uttara Bhadrapada, which is it's Saturn ruled, and it's the nakshatra of the spiritual teacher, basically the spiritual servant, the person who goes about teaching their worldview. So Revati is actually more of a creative, artistic type of spiritual practitioner, in that they don't tend to follow the rules. They tend to break out of the rules because their co-ruling planet, as opposed to being Saturn, which is the planet of authority and boundaries and rules and that kind of thing, where they're trying to apply structure to the spiritual, they're structuring the unstructurable. Revati doesn't really much care for structure. It doesn't believe in the nature of structure. What it's more interested in doing is creating a visual or sensory or philosophical representation of what they believe to be true, and whether or not that contradicts or whether or not that people accept it, it doesn't really matter, because they're just putting the message out there like, hey, this is how I see things. So from here, you get basically one of the pure archetypes of the artist, where you get somebody like a Picasso or a Salvador Dali, who plays with perception itself, who sort of bends around the boundaries of what people see. Now, the thing I like, or what's it called? The painting or the image that I think best suits this nakshatra is this painting. I think it's by Salvador Dali, where he's got these clocks and they're melting. And basically what he's saying is there are no boundaries. The boundaries that you see are just an illusion, and what you really want to do is free yourself of the constraints of time and the constraints of boundaries, and embrace the fluidity of things. So that's basically what this nakshatra is about. It's about embracing the fluidity of things, taking multiple points of view, multiple philosophies, combining them all, and not necessarily being like bound in by any one set of rules, any one belief system. So that's basically what happens when you mix the philosopher of Jupiter, the hypothesizer or the artist or the creator of Neptune, and then you get the communicator, the artist, the entrepreneur, the writer of Mercury. You put all these things together and you get a person who is like, they're interested in going out, detaching from reality, coming back, writing it down, drawing it out, creating a business around it, maybe selling it, and making their vision popular, not necessarily through rule following, but through presentation. So that's the Nakshatra of Revati, and that wraps up our Nakshatra series. So if you want, comment below and tell me what you think the next series should be. I may or may not take that advice, but moving forward, that's exactly, I'm going to just start a new series of a new astrological concept. So that's what's going to come next. If you watched all these videos, thank you for watching them. Keep doing it.